Oh, hello, Seth. This is it. This is it. This is the episode we've been waiting for. Listener questions and the last episode of our fair season.
I know, and it's called listeners' questions, but really, Pete, here's what I feel like it is.
What?
I feel like it is quiz day for me. It's
It is.
unannounced pop quiz.
Welcome back to law school. So we're gonna get started here right now. If you end up joining us and watching live, we invite you to ask more questions. We'd love to hear your reflections on what Seth is talking about. And if you're another attorney or a judge, well, I'd love you to let us know if he's right. How about that? We'll do a little
No,
bit of fact
no,
checking.
that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for if I'm wrong. Let's be honest here.
We got to start the show proper now, Seth. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. Today, it's listener question day.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Seth Nelson. As always, I'm here with my good friend Pete Wright. I was just telling Pete before we started, it's not really listener question day. It's quiz Seth day, unannounced pop quiz. And Pete would love people to write in, other lawyers, judges, really anyone. You don't have to have credentials behind your name just to say that I'm wrong. So we'll see what happens.
Somebody who's quick on the Google trigger, whatever. We'll take it. Listener question. Here's where we're starting, right here. This one comes from Tabby. Short one. How do guardian ad litems typically handle cases involving domestic violence allegations? This is a follow-on from our great guardian ad litem show.
Okay, so when you're dealing with domestic violence allegations in Florida, check your local jurisdiction. It really is, did it happen in front of the children, and how is it, if at all, impacting the children? Obviously, if there's been domestic violence in front of the children, that is going to have an impact on them. To what extent goes to how often and what's the extent of the domestic violence. So all of domestic violence is a matter of degree. And remember, in Florida, domestic violence in the civil case is defined by looking to the criminal statute. So you have to prove assault or battery. Or is it sexual assault? Is it aggravated battery? Is there a weapon involved? How frequently does it happen? How bad was it? Right? Is it getting in an argument and slapping a phone out of someone's hand? That's domestic violence, and I'm not downplaying it, versus kicking the shit out of someone and dragging them across the floor by their hair, and the kids seeing both of that. Okay, so there's degrees,
Yeah.
and a guardian ad litem will, one, see whether a domestic violence injunction was entered. Well, if there's a criminal case, they'll look at the criminal case. They'll do their own investigation, which if there's a criminal case pending, the person who's being accused of domestic violence might not talk to the guardian about it, because anything they say, as we all know from the movies, can and will be used against you in a court of law. So, delicate subject. If they won't do any joint meetings because there would probably be safety concerns, watching the children and seeing how the children interact. Now, I don't know if this domestic violence is against the other party, the other parent, or the children. If it's against the children, that's really going to be a heightened standard. And they might be asking for some psychological testing. They might be asking to come to court and say, Judge, we need help just more than me. So great question. Bad facts.
All right. This one comes from Rebecca. I'm currently a grad student working toward my MSW, and this issue has come up a number of times in my research. Are there any studies that you've come across on the long-term effectiveness of guardian ad litem recommendations in promoting positive outcomes for children as clearly a valuable part of the legal system? Has the Florida Bar ever made an effort to understand the long-term impacts of employing a gal through the legal system on families as opposed to more traditional forms of protected therapy? Oof, academic question, Seth. Are you ready for this?
Well, I'm ready for it. And I'm thinking to my father, blessed be his memory, who was a professor and did research.
Mm-hmm.
I know of no study.
Okay.
I don't even know from a research scientific perspective how you can make that leap from how a guardian comes in. Because all a guardian does is come in and say, they're not trying to be kumbaya. They're neutral, and they're going in and evaluating and saying, I think this is best for this family. but there's so many external factors that may or may not play out after that decision is made on whether the judge adopt the parenting plan in whole or in part of what the guardian did or advised or recommended. It's a great question about what's the long-term effect of guardians. I don't know from a scientific perspective, not my field, how you could even gather the information and whether parents and kids would want to be part of that study.
Okay, fair enough. So doesn't say it doesn't exist somewhere,
I'm just unaware
but
of
it's
it.
not here. Yeah, all right. The next question is from Bach, Pop Culture Trivia. I have to imagine that name is anonymized. If not, it's fantastic. Do you know the most famous Bach in pop culture right now?
I do not, and that is not a surprise that anyone's been listening to the show. I know
I get
nothing about pop
one win.
culture.
It's a character in Wicked.
I know Wicked.
You know Wicked. There you go. And so this is what Bach has to say. How do guardian ad litems typically coordinate with other professionals involved in the case, like therapists or school counselors? Can I expect them to just, I don't know, talk to these people without me present? Are they allowed to talk to whomever they please?
Yes, be prepared for them to talk to them without you present. But don't be prepared just for them to reach out to everybody. If there's someone that you believe they need to talk to, professional or otherwise, put them on your collateral list. But here are things to consider on the collateral list. How often do these people see you with the children? How often do they see the children? How often do they see your spouse or the other parent with the children? How frequently do they see them? When was the last time they saw them? Because I've been on cases where the other side puts all these collaterals on, and right when they're collateral, I'm going to take their deposition because I'm going to see what the guardian says. And the guardian might say, oh, this party says that they're great parents and that they have always seen this parent do a great job with them. And then I take the deposition. I'm like, the child is 12 years old. When's the last time you saw them with the child? 3 years ago. Okay, done with this witness, right?
Yeah, okay.
So give some thought, because every collateral you put on the list, more time, more fees.
Okay. Thank you, Bach. Great question. Next question from Torn Across Borders. There's a lot of drama in that name. I like it.
Yeah, it's people are listening, and I can already tell this is going to be a tough one.
What is a typical long-distance parenting plan for an infant and a toddler? My ex moved away to Canada, and I still live in the U.S. He did not support us for 6 months, but has suddenly reappeared wanting this custody. He is crazy, in my opinion, but there's nothing I can point to like drugs or physical abuse. He has been very verbally and emotionally abusive to me and has threatened that he will take the children completely from me. He's demanding 50-50 custody in Canada, where he would fly them back and forth every week. This seems horrible. He has a lot of money and lawyers, and I'm worried we have a 50-50 presumption in our state. My lawyer is saying it could happen until school starts in the worst case. I'm pushing for a few monthly visits for a few days in my state, even since money is not an issue for him. I'm not sure if I should offer more time for the summer or let the kids go to Canada. Even 2 nights away seems too long, as I am still nursing. I'm not ready to give them up for longer than a few nights, and I don't even want to do that, but I'm trying to be reasonable. What is a normal schedule that is good for kids at this age? He doesn't know how to care for them, and he never has had them on his own overnight, but he is now trying to act as the best father, bringing gifts, paying child support, taking the kids to the playground, etc. So I'm worried the judge will give him what he wants now that he appears interested. An infant and a toddler to Canada every other week. Seth.
Okay, so from the sound of the question, they do not live in northern Wisconsin or upper peninsula of Michigan to make crossing the border easy. So here's, let me lay out a typical, in quotes, air quotes, plan. A little bit of what you described. I'm going to start with school-aged and back down to the infant and toddler. Because as their attorney said, well, maybe this happens until school age, because it cannot happen at school age, because you can't do week on, week off and miss a week of school. Mm-hmm. So a typical long distance parenting plan is with, let's say, mom in this case, during the school year. And for winter break, usually split in half. Dad might get more. Maybe dad gets Thanksgiving. You alternate Thanksgiving every year, but maybe dad gets spring break every year. Maybe dad gets long weekends, either in the mom's state or if he wants to fly the kids up for a long weekend. As they get older, it gets harder because kids are involved in stuff on the weekends. And part of the being the parent is you fly down and you watch them in soccer games. That's part of parenting. And then more time in the summer. And the question is, when you do more time in the summer, do you bookend it where mom gets the first week and the last week of summer and maybe 1 week in the middle? And that's 3 weeks out of a 10-week summer and dad gets 7, right? Which sounds horrible, but if it was 50-50 in the summer, mom would get 5 and dad would get 5. So he's getting 2 extra weeks, right?
Right.
Some people try to take out that middle week and just say, nope, it's just bookends. Dad gets 8, mom gets 2, right? I always argue for a third or a fourth because the last week of summer, it's all about getting the kids ready for school again. It's not really when you're doing
that's
vacation.
not a vacation.
Okay.
Right.
Down to the toddlers and the infant. Studies show that, and this kind of goes to the MSW student that had a question a minute ago, but studies do show that kids do better with frequency of time seeing each parent. So that's why if it's a local parenting plan, 2 nights with mom, 2 nights with dad, switch the weekends, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. Infants don't do well on 1 week on, 1 week off.
Right.
So I would encourage a lot, if I was looking at this case new, I would encourage a lot of FaceTimes, even with the little ones, right? And it doesn't have to be like an infant and a toddler. It's hard to keep their attention.
Right.
So maybe you put the FaceTime on an iPad that's propped up when they're eating to give them, hey, they're eating. Look at what we're doing. Talk to dad, And even if they get distracted and come back to it, dad has to understand that's the best you're going to get.
Yeah.
Right. So I would be looking into that. Yes, I can.
What are the
Go ahead.
practicalities, though, of just getting the kids back and forth?
That's what I was going to go to next is one, how are they flying? Who's flying with them? Who's paying for the expense of the flights? And that's why in the summer, if dad's like, I want them all summer, what's attractive to that for a judge is less flights.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to be careful why you're saying it's not best for the kids to do whatever plan you're doing, because there's the reverse. It's too much travel. Oh, okay. I'll give them to dad all summer.
Yeah. Right.
1 trip at the beginning, 1 trip at the end. And you're like,
You're just eating up the frequency thing, right?
Yeah.
You lose a lot of that.
yeah. Now, the fact that you're nursing, I've had judges say there's formula and you can store milk and do the best that you can. And that's what we're going to do. So, yeah, this is a tough case, and a judge has to make a decision on what's best for the children today, and they're not, if they do a 50-50 time sharing, they're not supposed to come back and say, well, now they're in school, let's change it. I mean, you're just getting more litigation. So it's a difficult one, but that could be a potential outcome. So
Okay.
tough one. I understand the headline on that one.
This next question comes from Doug, who is talking about our appraisal episodes. How do you handle appraising digital assets? You guys talked about wine and watches and real estate, but what about things like NFTs, domain names, even social media accounts? I've spent a ton on digital movies and TV shows. Does my Amazon Prime and Apple TV account have any value in digital film collections that should be considered? It sounds like I could have written this question.
I was about to say. I was about to say.
It wasn't.
Who
But Doug
is
and I would be
Doug?
best friends if Doug actually.
Like,
I knew Doug, we'd be tight.
and here's the other thing. This is why another reason why I think you might have written this question, Pete.
Why?
I don't know the answer.
Oh, We got one. Everybody, I know you've been waiting for this just as long as I have. And I'm just proud that we're back to the halcyon days of equanimity between
Now,
us.
that's the honest answer. The lawyer answer is I'm about to make an argument, right?
Okay.
So, no, that's an excellent question. Yeah, if you've downloaded and purchased movies, I would say that's an asset. I wouldn't call it a collection because you can just download them still, assuming that you can, right? If there's an old movie, you can probably get online and still download it and pay for it. But if it's in your collection, I would go and see what the value is of downloading today. I don't think there would be any real value of having the whole collection and like splitting it up,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not going to sell your Amazon Prime account to someone. I don't think there's a market for
Well,
that.
there's no market, and I believe it's against terms of service. That's one of the great issues in digital asset holding is that once you pass on or lose access to that account, you're done. All of those, you
Right.
can't like will your movie collection to your kids
Right,
by way of Amazon or Apple. That
right.
sort of.
What was the other ones he said in there? NFTs, you can certainly
You can find a value
get
of those, right?
appraisals of those. I could get those.
Domain names too. Domain names.
Same.
Howtosplitatoaster.com. Very
Yeah.
popular.
Oh, let me tell you. If anyone wants to buy that, just click, question. How
Yeah.
much will we take for it? The button's right there, as Pete says.
Joke's on you, though. You'll just get law questions all day long. That's all they'll use it for. Or social media accounts. I know there is a market for social media accounts. People
Yep.
buying and trading handles.
I
and-
would
and
look
great
for an
domain
expert.
names.
I would go research and find experts in this
Okay.
field, and that's how I'd do it. Great question,
Great.
Doug.
And producer Andy has written about family sharing on that question. Maybe Andy is Doug. I don't know. And on family sharing, you can add this is a workaround. If somebody passes on or loses access to an account, you can add them to a family share account and still have access to their movies, but that's technically against terms of service and it is frowned upon. And you only get, I think, 6 accounts on a family share account. And if one of them is a
Deceased person.
a deceased person, you
So, on the advice of
don't have any more
counsel,
kids.
we don't give legal advice on this show, but don't break the law or
Yeah,
terms
right.
of service. All right.
Right. All right. This next
Andy.
question from Ruby D. Does the cost of the appraisal itself ever become a factor? Like if it costs $5,000 to appraise something that might only be worth $8,000, is it worth it?
Yes, I have that conversation all the time. They'll say, well, how much is appraisal cost? And I'll get quotes from appraisers. And then they'll say, well, I can't tell you what that jewelry collection is worth because I haven't seen it. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be like, hey, before you give me your appraisal, let me show you some of it and see if it's even worth it. And they're going to do that to try to get the business, right? But no, I think that question, not only about appraisals, if it costs 5 and it goes to 8, is it worth it? That everyone's like, well, that's a $3,000 difference. Well, no, because you got to pay the lawyers to argue about the appraisals, and you're going to eat that up. So that goes with anything that we do. Is it worth the expense of litigation, whether it's attorney's fees, cost, expert fees, going to court, whatever it may be, getting a transcript, all of it? Is it worth what you're arguing about? And that ultimately is a client decision.
Hear me out. Antiques Roadshow. It's like free appraisal, right?
Yeah,
You
but
take
you
that
can't
in
call
court.
them into you can't call them in to testify.
You can't call Antiques Roadshow in to testify.
No.
That
You
would
wanna
be a
know why?
celebrity trial.
You want to know why?
Why?
Because they're on to the next show. They're like Antique Roadshow.
It's in the name. It's a roadshow. All right. I'm the dummy. I'm sorry about that. New question from Deposition Dilemma. Great show. I'm behind, but just caught up on depots, on the episode on depots, and it was really timely for me. I have a few questions I hope you can bang out. This is a question that comes in a list. Number 1, what happens if my attorney doesn't object to a bad question? Can that hurt my case? Do you want me to just
Yes.
roll them all out?
The first one is yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Do you want to comment on it or shall I roll on?
Keep rolling and we'll come back.
right.
Bad question.
Are there any consequences for an attorney who makes too many objections? Number 3, if the opposing lawyer keeps asking the same question in different ways, do I have to keep answering? When can I tell the lawyer to pound sand? I love that so much. What does a judge think if a deposition is full of objections? Does that make me look bad? Thanks, guys. I can't stress how helpful this show has been for me over the last 6 months. Thank you, Deposition Dilemma. What do you think?
Okay. No, if your attorney keeps objecting, it does not make you look bad.
Okay.
You're just sitting there answering the question. So that's fine. Too many objections in a deposition is not a problem at all. If anyone does a lot of objections in a depo, it's me, because I am protecting the record, and the majority of my objections will be objection to form. Go ahead and answer. So if they keep asking you the same question a different way, ultimately I would say objection to form, and then you'd have to say, go ahead and answer. And then literally, if it is like over the top, I would say asked and answered. And then finally, I'm going to say, I'm instructing my client not to answer. And then I'm going to take the heat in court. Right.
This is the important thing. You, Dilemma, are not telling anyone to pound sand, but your lawyer might. That's what right. I'm hearing.
But I'm going to say it nicely. I'm going to instruct my client not to answer. So now you can call into the show and tell us to pound sand anytime you want.
Anytime you want.
So, yeah. So,
and then so the judge question, the last one.
Say the question again, Pete.
What does a judge think if a deposition is full of objections? Does that make me look bad?
No. I thought I answered that. It does not.
Oh, okay.
It does not. But back to the bad question, if they don't object.
Yeah.
You're in a little tight spot. So you need to follow the rules of what I would advise. Talk to your client. But, we've gone through listen to the question, think about the question, answer it honestly, least number of words as possible, and shut up. But if they say something like, when did you stop beating your dog? And your client doesn't, and your lawyer doesn't object, then you're going to say, I can't answer that question because I never beat my dog. Right?
Okay.
So, you got to clean it up a little bit in your answer, but be careful.
Got it. Question from Hidden Asset Headache. So, let's say my soon-to-be ex-spouse has been a little too enthusiastic about crypto, and now that we're divorcing, I have a suspicion they've stashed away some digital assets off the books. Can a forensic accountant actually track down hidden cryptocurrency, even if it's in a cold wallet? I don't know what a cold wallet is. What kind of tricks do people usually pull to underreport income in situations like this? And if it turns out they did hide money and fudge the tax numbers while we were filing jointly, am I on the hook for that too? Also, real talk, hiring a forensic accountant sounds expensive. Is it even worth it for a regular divorce, or is this only the ultra rich? Thanks, guys. And look at this, producer Andy, so good. A cold wallet, also known as offline storage, is a cryptocurrency wallet that stores private keys offline, making it highly secure from online threats and hacks.
A lot of questions there. People are asking multiples here.
I know.
Okay. Hidden assets. Let's talk about that. One, you can ultimately find them, though it might take a lot of work. And here's how you ultimately find them. At some point, there was a transaction that took good old-fashioned currency and turned it into crypto. You had to get into this crypto system somehow, and you still to this day do that with cash. So you've got to find the in. Okay, so that's one. Then you start asking for the keys. And once you get in to that one, you got to go through the blockchain and see what's going on in this account. Then the problem is if they're saying, well, I don't have the key, because they're using the cold wallet and they're storing that after, right? That's going to take computer forensics and all that. It's very expensive. Now I'm going to get to, but they didn't disclose it. So you kind of asked, I think, two questions there. One was on the tax returns, and one was, what about in court? Well, if it's not disclosed in court, but you find it later, in Florida, you can go fraud on the court because they didn't disclose and they hid it on purpose and it was fraudulent and undo everything, which is also another nightmare. On your tax returns, there is a federal tax law called innocent spouse concept,
Okay.
which is, I'm just saying, husband, wife, doesn't matter. The husband ran his business, always did stuff. It was, a scrap metal business. And he's always collecting junk, selling junk, doing this, doing that, buying equipment, selling equipment. And you're just at home raising the kids and he's e-filing it and you never even see him and he does them joint. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The doctrine is innocent spouse. Like, I didn't know what was going on. Right?
Right.
I had no idea. And I tease my wife about this concept because she doesn't audit my firm books. It's something wrong on my firm books that gives me a different K1 that then gets reported on our joint return, and now it's fraudulent, and she signed off on the return. I'm like, you're never going to get innocent spouse. You used to be a tax lawyer that worked for the IRS. Like, it's not happening.
Right.
So, good questions. Oh, whether it's for the uber
Yeah,
wealthy
whether
or a
it's
regular divorce.
worth it.
So I don't know what you mean by regular divorce, but this goes back to the earlier question. If the appraisal is $5,000 and it's worth $8,000, is it worth it? The forensic accountant might be worth it just to save time and money, so the lawyer's office doesn't have to do the standard of living analysis on an alimony. Figuring out how much alimony someone may or may not need. Maybe figuring out the incomes. It might be less expensive for the forensic accountant to do the tracing than the lawyer. So I don't know the complexities of it. If it is a 2 W-2 employees, you probably don't need a forensic accountant. If he's hiding some crypto, you got to decide whether you want to go try to find it or not.
Yeah.
But no, I've had cases where they were a teacher and a firefighter, let's say, and we needed a forensic accountant because they had some side hustles that were doing well, and we had to value that. Or there was some tracing of some money that we had to determine how much was marital or not. So it's not all or nothing with a forensic accountant. You can give them kind of piecemeal work too.
Targeted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This one comes from Ariel. Hey, Pete, I found this show because I listened to you on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast, and this is a huge issue in my divorce right now. So, Seth, how do you handle a parenting plan when one parent refuses to acknowledge a child's ADHD? My ex and I completely disagree on medication, routines, and even the custody schedule. I'm worried that a 2-2-3 split is making things worse for our kiddo. Do you have any advice on how to navigate this from the perspective of ADHD parents and kids? Or would you consider bringing in an expert to dive deeper into this? Thank you so much.
Oh, great question. This goes beyond just ADHD, so I'm going to expand it a bit. This goes on any medications. This goes for any time that parents aren't going to do it. Now, with ADHD kids, there's a lot going on there that makes it more complicated. I appreciate that. But ultimately, if doctors are advising, and this is going to be a battle of the experts, that this child needs this medication and here's what happens, positive things, right? Then that is a good thing for kids. And if they're unwilling to do the medication, right, then that's a problem. And going from one household to another household when maybe routines are different and bedtimes are different. And like, I would get on as the page as much as you can. Like, maybe there is a pillow that's better or a mattress that you both can use, as much similarities as possible. But ultimately, that will be a court decision. And I've tried those cases when parents don't agree on medical issues. And they're not easy because you really got to show. Now, back to your 2-2-3. And I don't know where you are in your process. Check with your lawyer. Sometimes you go week on, week off. And
To
what that
account for
does-
things like the stressors of neurodivergence.
That's right. And what happens is child's with you on that week and homework's getting done. Not late to school. That takes the exams and gets B's. The week with dad, late to school, homework's not being turned in, getting C's and D's on exams. So it's awful for your kid,
Hmm.
right?
To be used as like a test bed for
Right.
parenting plans.
Good for your case,
Yeah.
which is good for hopefully the long-term impacts. So I tell a lot of my clients, this is going to be short-term pain. In short term, might be 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
18
So
months is a lot of time in a kid's
in a
life.
kid's life. So great question. I hope I gave you some food for
Well,
thought there.
thank you, Ariel. And thank you for following the trail of breadcrumbs from the ADHD show. Love that you did that. From precarious predicament plight.
These
I,
names today.
I know. That one definitely feels like Andy had his thumb on the naming scale to
Gotcha.
me. He's kind of an alliterative guy.
No, we don't let them talk.
Here we go. Hi, Pete and Seth. I just read an article about restaurant owners being briefed on what to do if ICE comes in to interrogate staff. We are in a precarious situation ourselves, and my wife and I are facing a divorce. What do I need to do to protect myself from my government so we can get the divorce complete? I'm scared to walk into a courthouse right now. Thank you both.
That's a really interesting question. The best thing you can do if you're afraid to walk into a courthouse is settle your case. Judges are there for two reasons in family law in Florida. Check your local jurisdiction. One, they have to ultimately sign off on a parenting plan, and they're the ones that have to sign the document that makes you divorced, the final judgment. And two, in Florida, they have to take testimony to prove to their satisfaction that they have jurisdiction, power to hear the case, and that your marriage is irretrievably broken. So, what I mean by that, somebody has to show up at court and raise the right hand. In those questions, they go like this in Florida. Have you been a resident of the state of Florida for the last 6 months prior to filing your dissolution of marriage? If so, you usually have to show a driver's license. If you don't have a governmental issued ID, such as a driver's license with a date on it, you can do an affidavit of residency where you get two people swearing, yeah, I know they've been a resident for 6 months. And I've done that before because during the pendency of the case, or right before we filed, my client updated his driver's license. So I don't have that evidence, right? That the issue date is not compliant with the law. So you do an affidavit. And then, is your marriage irretrievably broken? Yes. And then there's some other questions that get asked. You don't have to go to that hearing. Your spouse can go to that hearing. And sometimes the hearing is on Zoom. So maybe you're not even
You don't have to go into a courtroom
at
at
the
all.
courthouse. Nowhere in those questions does it ask whether you're a citizen.
Fascinating and timely. And for our international audience, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
There's ICE.
That's ICE.
Yeah.
That's ICE. Great question, and sorry for that stress. These are hard times. From Default Decree Distress Dispatcher. He's just leveling up now.
Yeah.
Every question.
Now he's just showing off.
He's just showing off. Question is, how should someone handle interactions or legal matters with their soon-to-be ex moving forward if they default on the divorce and the court has already made its decisions?
What's the beginning part of that question?
How should someone handle interactions or legal matters with their soon-to-be ex moving forward if they default on the divorce and the court has already made its decisions?
I would abide by whatever the final judgment says on what the court defaulted, made its decisions, you're done. Now, if there's new stuff coming up, you got to deal with that as it arises.
What does that mean to default on the divorce?
Yeah. So when you file and you have the person served, they have 20 days in Florida to file an answer. If they don't file, you can get what's called a default. There's two types of default. One is a clerk's default that can turn into a final judgment. The other, is a judge's default. The difference is I file and I sue you, Pete. and you go down to the courthouse and you take a sticky note and you say, Seth's an idiot. And you take it and you say, I want this filed in this case. And you write the case number on it. The clerk is required to take that file in. The clerk doesn't have the power not to put that in the court file.
Okay.
If anything is in the court file, the clerk cannot do a clerk's default because you filed something, because they don't have the power to say that wasn't a proper answer to the petition.
Mm-hmm.
You go to court for that.
Okay.
You go to the judge. Okay. So someone files something in court. You go and you say, Judge, I want default. They never responded appropriately. You know, the judge might say, I'll give them 10 more days, and they still don't do it, whatever. So here's the tricky part. In a default, you still have to go to court and put on evidence because the court has to make a decision on what's best for the child. Yeah. So, but if the judge has made their decision pursuant to the question and the final judgment is there, abide by the final judgment.
Okay. From Settlement Saga student, what steps should someone take to prepare for a settlement conference when heading to trial? And how should they approach the possibility of the case settling during the trial?
You should always be prepared to settle by knowing the issues in the case, what you think the law will provide you based on the facts that you believe you have, that the judge will find is true. People, it's not uncommon, but it doesn't happen every day, where you settle in the middle of trial. And the reason for that is you're settling because something happened in the courtroom and someone now thinks they have the upper hand or things aren't going as well. And so maybe you'll get a settlement. Now, sometimes the judge will be like, you guys need to go talk about this, right? And they might apply some pressure in saying, I'm not prejudging the case, but my understanding of these issues and how this is playing out, and he's going to, or she's going to say things positive or negative on both sides to give you both some, that might work for me, that might not. Like, you sure you don't want to go talk about this? No one's going to be happy with what I'm about to say, right? Like, then you get some control back because once you give it to the judge, right? So you should always be ready to settle. The other reason that sometimes things don't settle in court if the judge is really quiet is there's momentum in court. And one day you think you're up, the next day you think you're down, and then the next day maybe you're back up. So it all changes like the tennis match that we've talked before. But you should always be prepared to settle your case and don't make the mistake of, you know what, I've spent this much money. What's the matter of spending more? Like, don't go, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, that's just not a good logical explanation to not settle your case. Or I think I'm getting this. So look, if you can get a settlement that you can live with, then go for it.
Take it. All right. From Subpoena Strategy Seeker, how do I determine which trial witnesses I need to subpoena and what factors I should consider when deciding which individuals are essential to support my case effectively?
This isn't just subpoenaing. I just do this broader. How do you decide who to call? Start at the end. What do you want the judge to decide in your favor? What are those quote unquote facts that the judge needs to say, yes, this is a fact that favors husband. This is a fact that favors wife, whatever side you're on. And then what information do you need to bring to the judge to prove those in court? And who or how are you going to prove them? If you have a document, a bank statement, how are you going to get that quote unquote into evidence? What witness is going to be on the stand that can testify that that's a true statement, that it's their bank statement? Did you waive records custodian? What, just so everything you need to prove. And I like to have 3 ways to get the same information in evidence, because if one doesn't work, I need a backup and another backup. Sometimes you don't have that. Sometimes you have one thing, it's a witness, right? So you got to figure out what you're going to do as far as the end result, what you want, and then how do you prove that? And then who's going to be the witness to prove that? And that's how you come up with your witness list.
Begin with the end in mind.
That's right.
Okay. From Standard Restrictions Curious, What actions are prohibited once I've been served in a family law case under standard family law restraining orders? What are the key restrictions I need to be aware of?
Read the document.
It's on the
Read
document.
the document.
Okay.
Whatever that says you can't do, don't do. Standard domestic violence injunction language. Don't go within 500 feet of the other person's residence or workplace. Don't knowingly go within 100 feet of their vehicle. Turn in your firearms to the authorities on a temporary basis. And read the document. I can't tell you what the standard is. You got to read it. There could be changes to it. Also, in domestic violence cases, when you go to court the first time, it's usually what they call, it's a terrible name, it's called a cattle call. Everyone's there to have their case heard. The judge isn't going to listen to it. If you get an agreement, yes, the court will settle it then. If you don't, and it's going to go to a half-day trial, full-day trial, or 3-hour trial, whatever it is, that judge is going to call special set it, put it on a special date and time. At that hearing, I let the judge know whether there's any problems with the order. Let me give you an example of what it might be. Can't go within 500 feet of a child's school. I live within 500 feet of this school. It's across the street.
Right. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? So those are the type of things courts will work with you on that. Like, okay, how do we solve that problem, right? I always let the court know, and these are recorded. I always let the court know whether my client has firearms, and if so, they've been turned in because I'm going to court and saying they've been turned in, or whether my client does not have firearms and say, Judge, I know the court orders turn in firearms. My client doesn't have any. I just want the court to be aware because I think those are really highlight issues.
Okay. We've got a question here from Taylor. What percentage of your cases go to trial? I really don't want to go to trial, but my attorney is almost certain we will have to. Unfortunately, my ex is demanding a super unreasonable parenting plan, and it's not supported by the law, like full custody and decision making. I know he only is doing this to spite me, as he's hardly ever seen the children for the past year of our divorce, and has only just started exercising his full parenting time for the last 3 months. I'm guessing because he just got a new lawyer. We have had motion after motion with awful allegations, and it is expensive and emotionally exhausting. I just can't keep up like this. He acts so nice during court and in any written communication, but I do think even the judge now sees this as an act after all the hearings we have had. I want to end this. I'm willing to give up child support if he will stop this madness, but I understand this is not an option. What can I do to get him to settle and stop this craziness? Do you have any other advice? I can't give up on our children, so I truly feel stuck. I don't feel I have anything else to compromise on but money.
Ask your lawyer to get a trial as soon as possible.
Set a date.
Beat that drum. Set a date. Get into court. Fight for a date. I don't care if that date is 8 months out. Get a date. And keep getting case managements. Judge, we're going to trial. We don't want a continuance. There should be no reason. Be a dog on a bone about getting finality as far as your first trial. And the reason I say that, when you're dealing with guys like this, some people have to be told in court, and you got to press and press and press. Then once you get your final judgment, as we talked about, maybe they keep on doing it. Maybe there's problems after. Unfortunately, some people are just wired this way, where they're just going to do this to spite you. They like the conflict. So that's why you just got to hammer it. Now, as much as you're saying there's been motion, motion, and motion, look at how that question changed. I think the judge is figuring it out now that he's been in front of us a bunch of times. So sometimes they do this and you're going and going and going, and it hurts their case. Where if they showed up for trial one day, maybe they could pull one over on them, right? Sorry, I don't have better news for you. And I would also tell your lawyer, send over an offer that you can live with.
Yeah.
And let him, if he says no, he says no. Some people have to be told.
Can you reflect just a minute on there's one line in here that stuck out to me, which is, I think because he got a new lawyer. Can you talk about the new lawyer factor? Like
New lawyers can help or hurt. But if
Yeah.
if that lawyer's saying you're asking for all this time and you haven't used it, start using your time. That's what the lawyers probably told him, because now he's
Yeah.
starting to use his time. And in doing so, he's helping his case because now he's
Yeah.
actually showing up, right?
Yeah.
In doing that. So, yes, lawyers have a big impact. I've talked to clients a lot that want to switch lawyers, and I say, look, one, it's expensive to get me on board. You're not going to get that necessarily recovered in attorney's fees because I had to get up to speed.
Hmm.
And some stuff, that ship has sailed. You already have a guardian. I don't like the guardian. You already got a forensic accountant. Not my favorite one. Like,
Hmm.
there's nothing I'm going to be able to do about that. There's court
Yeah.
orders. There's agreements, right? And it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but you got to pick up and go.
We've got a question here from Retreat Receipts Reckoner. That might be the best one. It might really be the best one. My husband of 13 years asked for a divorce and then went on 2 vacations without me within the span of 2 months. The first just up and left without warning for 5 days, and the second let the kids and I know that he would be gone for a week. Told the kids it was a retreat. My question is, doesn't his charges count as using marital assets? I can't prove that he was with someone, but I'm very inclined to believe he was based on prior events. Unfortunately, I don't have receipts as he keeps his finances separately. Advice?
In Florida, check your local jurisdiction. Any debts run on a credit card after the date of filing is a post-filing debt that is non-marital. So I would just say any of these debts that he did on his credit card is post-filing. He needs to pay that from non-marital money, not marital money. That's what I'd start with. Then I would argue that, Judge, 2 trips back to back. We typically didn't go on trips like that. These weren't regular reoccurring expenses. It's one thing if he goes and he takes the kids and he runs the credit card at a, buying the kids school clothes or fast food or whatever the case may be. Then you can say that's regular reoccurring. Fine. He can pay that out of marital assets. But these trips, these retreats, then,
Yeah.
start doing a subpoena. Where did
Right,
you
because
go?
this
What was the
question,
retreat? Right.
the fact that she doesn't have the receipts because he keeps
You're
his
going to get
finances
them.
separately.
You're going to
That's
get them
not
in
an issue.
discovery. No,
Yeah,
you're
that's
going to
going to
get.
come
Well, it's
out.
an issue. It's going to come out. You just got to be a dog
Yeah.
on a bone. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Retreat Receipts Reckoner, RRR. That's outstanding. Well done, Andy, for sneaking that in. These have been some really good questions.
They've
Seth.
been
This has been
excellent questions.
it's like people are actually listening to the show and maybe, I don't know, taking notes. It's extraordinary, this level of introspection. How do you feel about this season? This was kind of a different way to do the show, doing this Your Divorce Case map that we've been doing. How do you feel about it?
As we've talked from the very beginning of this show, is I'm really pleased with the show if we're helping people. We are
Yeah.
giving this out there in the world for free.
Mm-hmm.
No one has to listen to it. If you listening to it, it's because it's helping you. And they always say if you can just help one person, it's worth it. Well, I don't know about that. I'd like to help more than just one person, right? But we are certainly, by the questions we're getting and people writing these wonderful things to us, sometimes in an email, sometimes in the show notes, or when they clicking and communicating with you and Andy, and emails that I will get and forward to you. It's great. And nowhere that I'm aware of for the general public is there soup to nuts, A to Z, Your Divorce. Yeah, there's some books out there, right? But it's hard to commute to work in a car driving and read a book. So, if people found it helpful, it was great. I like going through the legal stuff,
Yeah.
right? And I love the psychologists we come on board. I love that. I love the math stuff. There's a lot that I like about what I do, but I really just hope people found it helpful. And if that was the case, then I'm all for it. And now we can put Andy back on it, trying to find more experts.
Oh, he is really on the proverbial grindstone right now. I mean, these calendar invitations are coming in hot and fast.
I know, and I'm getting email after email asking people asking us to be on the show,
Yeah.
and I just forward them to Andy, and like Andy handles that.
Stack them
You
up.
know.
Stack them up. Well, for those who are just coming to the show, this has been a heck of a season covering your divorce case. We've gone from the initial consultation through pleadings and motions. We've done the entire anatomy of the courtroom, people and the facility. We've talked about temporary relief. We've done the entire peace process. That's peace process, parenting plans, equitable distribution, alimony, child support, and everything else. We've talked about forensic accounting and mediation and guardian ad litems and depositions and appraisals, and we've done the entire trial. We did 3 episodes on the trial, and finally the appeals process. What is the appeal? It's been an extraordinary learning season. Thank you, Seth, so much.
Well, thank you,
for
Pete.
doing
You asked the
this.
great questions. Were you pleased with the season?
I'm very pleased with the season, and I think it's going to make a wonderful. I think this will be our greatest bookshelf season that we've done. I think this will be an evergreen season that people will be able to come back to again and again and again for years. I hope it becomes that level of a tool for people in their divorce. So
Sounds
sorry
good to me.
you have to go through it, but glad we can offer you
Glad we
something
can help you
to
through
help.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. We will be back in late April, so we're taking month and a half off to regroup and let Andy breathe, and then we'll be back with some new episodes. We've got some great guests coming up for season 11. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to the show. If you have questions, you can always go to howtosplitatoaster.com, click the Ask a Question button, and we'll answer it on an upcoming season 11 show. And it's possible that we'll have to do even more listener questions episodes. They're just stacking up.
maybe
I
in
love
the
them.
little break time, if there's a lot coming in, we'll pop on and do a show.
We'll have to do a very special episode. And you could always ask us, how much for the domain. We will take inquiries. On behalf of Seth Nelson, America's favorite divorce attorney, our very favorite non-speaking partner, Andy Nelson, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you next season right here on How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships.